I stared at the enrollment numbers again, my fingers drumming against the polished mahogany desk. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling mirrors of my ballet studio, casting long shadows across the empty practice room. 10 cancellations in 2 weeks. The thought made my stomach churn. "Miss Martinez, your flight booking is confirmed," my assistant Sarah called from the reception area. The annual Dance Educators Conference in San Francisco couldn't have come at a worse time, but I needed those networking connections more than ever. The Huntington Beach airport was unusually crowded for an autumn morning. I clutched my carry-on, scanning the departure board. Flight delayed. Perfect. Just perfect. My blonde hair was already falling out of its pristine bun, and my carefully pressed blazer felt suffocating in the stuffy terminal. "Window seat 15A?" A husky voice caught my attention. A tall brunette stood beside me, ticket in hand. "Looks like we're seat neighbors." Her green eyes sparkled with amusement, and something about her confident stance made me look twice. "You must be 15 Billions, I replied, trying to maintain my professional demeanor. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that screamed lawyer, but her scuffed combat boots told a different story. "Thea Murphy." She extended her hand. "Running late for a case presentation. The turbulence hit about an hour into our flight, bad enough that the drink service was canceled, and my knuckles turned white gripping the armrest." Thea noticed. "First time flying?" she asked, her voice gentle. "100th time, never gets easier." I forced a smile. "I usually distract myself by choreographing in my head." "Choreographing?" Her eyebrow arched with interest. "I run Martinez Ballet Academy, though at this rate." I trailed off, catching myself before spilling my troubles to a stranger. The plane lurched again, and I instinctively grabbed her hand. She didn't pull away. "Tell me about dance," she said, her thumb tracing small circles on my palm. "I used to dance, years ago, before law school consumed my life." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of conversation. Thea spoke passionately about her legal work, her eyes lighting up when discussing social justice. I found myself sharing stories about my students, the challenges of running a studio, even my fears about the future. When we finally landed, 3 hours late, neither of us rushed to leave. The terminal had emptied, leaving us alone with our carry-ons and unspoken words. "You know," Thea said, adjusting her laptop bag, "I've been thinking about getting back into dance. Any chance you offer private lessons?" I handed her my business card, our fingers brushing. "First lessons on the house. For a fellow window seat survivor." She smiled, tucking the card into her jacket pocket. "I might just take you up on that, Rachel Martinez." Watching her walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this delayed flight had been more than just a random encounter. Little did I know, it was about to change everything. A week after our flight, I was adjusting the mirrors in Studio A when Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Martinez, your private lesson is here." I turned, and there she was, Thea Murphy, looking completely different from the polished lawyer I'd met on the plane. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wearing fitted dancewear that revealed an athletic frame. "Surprised to see me?" She grinned, dropping her gym bag by the bar. "Pleasantly," I admitted, watching her warm up. Her technique was rough, but there was something magnetic about her movement. Raw talent hiding beneath years of neglect. "It's been 10 years, she said, stretching her hamstrings. "Law school has a way of stealing your passions." I positioned myself behind her, adjusting her form. "Your body remembers more than you think." My hands guided her shoulders back, feeling the tension in her muscles. "Breathe through it." Over the next hour, I watched her transform. Despite the occasional frustrated grunt, her movements grew more fluid, more confident. She was a quick study, absorbing corrections with an intensity that matched her courtroom persona. "You're holding back," I observed, demonstrating a simple combination. "Dance isn't like law. There's no winning or losing here." She attempted the sequence, stumbling slightly. "That's not what my old instructor said. Everything was about perfection." "Perfection is overrated." I caught her mid-fall, our faces inches apart. "Sometimes the most beautiful moments come from imperfection." The studio fell silent except for our breathing. Her green eyes met mine, and for a moment, I forgot about declining enrollments and financial worries. "Show me," she whispered. I led her through a simple pas de deux, our bodies moving in sync. Her hand found my waist, steady and sure. When the sequence ended, neither of us stepped away. "You're a natural partner," I said softly. "I have a good teacher." Her fingers traced my collarbone, sending shivers down my spine. The studio door clicked open. We jumped apart as Sarah entered with scheduling papers. "Same time next week?" Thea asked, gathering her things. "Twice a week," I corrected. "If you're serious about getting back into form." She paused at the door. "I'm serious about a lot of things, Rachel." After she left, I caught Sarah's knowing smile. "Don't start," I warned. I didn't say anything. She handed me the papers. "But she's different from your usual students." That night, reviewing class plans, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting to the way Thea moved, her determination, the electricity when we danced together. I told myself it was professional interest in a promising student. But deep down, I knew better. The strict ballet instructor in me was battling something stronger, something that made my heart race every time I remembered her touch. My phone buzzed with a text. "Thanks for today. Dancing with you feels like coming home." I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I replied, "The studio's always open for you." Setting down my phone, I walked to the window. The Huntington Beach sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Change was coming to my carefully choreographed life, and for once, I wasn't fighting it. The morning newspaper caught me off guard. There was Thea, looking fierce in her courtroom attire, under the headline, "Landmark Adoption Rights Case Challenges Status Quo." I nearly spilled my coffee reading about her role as lead counsel. During our next lesson, I couldn't help myself. "You didn't mention you were making headlines." She paused mid-pirouette. "Does it change things?" Her voice carried a hint of defensiveness. "Only makes me more impressed." I adjusted her arm position. Though some of my more conservative clients might not share that view. "Story of my life," she laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Being exactly who people don't expect me to be." Our evening sessions became longer, stretching well past closing time. One night, after a particularly intense practice, we sat on the studio floor, sharing takeout. "Why this case?" I asked, watching her push noodles around her container. "Because love shouldn't have limitations." She met my gaze. "Because families come in all forms." The studio felt smaller suddenly, more intimate. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. "Dance with me," she said abruptly, standing and offering her hand. No music played, but we didn't need any. Our bodies moved together in the fading light, finding rhythms in our shared breath. Her hand on my waist felt like belonging. "Rachel," she whispered, pulling me closer. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, years of unspoken desires flowing between us. Later that night, we made love in her downtown apartment, the city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. Every touch felt like discovering a new dance, a perfect choreography of passion and tenderness. Morning found us tangled in sheets, the early sun painting patterns across bare skin. "Stay," she murmured, pulling me back as I stirred. "I have morning classes," I protested weakly. "Cancel them." Her lips traced my shoulder. "The world can wait." But the world didn't wait. My phone buzzed with messages from Sarah about concerned parents questioning recent media coverage of the studio. "They're connecting dots," I sighed, showing Thea the messages. She propped herself up on an elbow. "Are you worried? About losing students?" "Yes. About us?" "No." I kissed her softly. "Some dances are worth the risk." That afternoon, I watched her prepare case notes while I worked on choreography. The studio had become our shared space, law books mingling with dance schedules. "The hearing's next week," she mentioned casually, too casually. "You're nervous." "Terrified," she admitted. "This case could change lives, or crush hopes." I moved behind her, massaging tense shoulders. "You've got this. Same as dancing, trust your training, feel the moment." She leaned back against me. "Stay with me tonight?" "Always." As we left the studio, hand in hand, I noticed Sarah had left a note on my desk. "Sometimes the best performances come from following your heart." The evening air was warm as we walked to dinner, discussing future plans, sharing dreams. Neither of us mentioned the challenges ahead, the case, the studio's reputation, society's judgments. For now, it was enough to be together. Two women who found each other because of a shared love for window seats and weren't afraid to rewrite the rules of their own story. The local news vans arrived on a Tuesday morning. I watched from my office as reporters set up cameras outside the studio, their presence sending ripples of whispers through my morning classes. Rachel Martinez, any comment on your relationship with attorney Thea Murphy? A microphone thrust through the door before Sarah could close it. My advanced class parents were already calling, their concerns thinly veiled behind polite inquiries. The studio's reputation, built over years of dedication, was suddenly under scrutiny. Mrs. Henderson called to withdraw Emily, Sarah reported, her voice tight. That's the third withdrawal this week. I was reviewing the damage when my phone lit up with a text from Thea. Turn on Channel 7. The opposing counsel, a sharp-suited man named James Barrett, was speaking outside the courthouse. We must question the personal motivations driving this case, when the lead counsel is involved in a relationship that clearly. I switched it off, my hands shaking. They were using us to discredit the case. Thea burst into the studio an hour later, her face flushed with anger. They're trying to make this about us instead of the actual issues. It's working, I said quietly, showing her the withdrawal notices. She paced the studio, her reflection multiplied in the mirrors. I should have known they'd play dirty. Rachel, if this is too much, don't. I caught her arm, pulling her close. Don't you dare step back now. The showcase rehearsal that evening felt charged with tension. Thea watched from the wings as I directed my remaining students through their routines. During a water break, I overheard two teenage dancers whispering. My mom says Miss Martinez is different now. Different how? The other girl asked. You know, since she started seeing that lawyer lady. I cleared my throat, making them jump. Different isn't always bad, ladies. Back to positions. After rehearsal, Thea helped me sort through costume pieces backstage. The intimate space filled with unspoken words. You're losing everything you've built, she finally said. I turned to face her. I'm gaining something more important. She pressed me against the costume rack, her kiss desperate and deep. Stage lights cast dramatic shadows as we held each other, defiant against the world's judgment. The showcase is in 2 days, I whispered against her neck. I'll be here. She straightened my rehearsal skirt. Front row. That night, alone in my apartment, I received an email from my biggest sponsor. They were reconsidering their association with the studio. I called Thea, my voice breaking. They're all leaving. Then we'll build something new, she said firmly. Something honest. The next morning, Sarah greeted me with unexpected news. 3 new enrollment inquiries overnight. Families specifically mentioning they want their children in an inclusive environment. A small victory, but it felt massive. Change was coming, ready or not. During that evening's rehearsal, I watched my dancers move with renewed purpose. Some had left, but those who stayed danced with a freedom I'd never seen before. Thea appeared as we were finishing, legal papers tucked under her arm. She looked exhausted but determined. Barrett offered a settlement, she said once we were alone. If I step down from the case. And? She smiled, pulling me into an embrace. I told him to shove it. Some things are worth fighting for. The studio lights dimmed automatically, leaving us in the gentle glow of sunset. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more judgment, more battles to face. But tonight, we danced in the shadows. 2 women choosing love over fear, truth over pretense, creating our own definition of perfect form. The letter from Premier Dance Foundation arrived on a stormy morning. Their annual $50,000 sponsorship had been the studio's lifeline for years. Effective immediately, I read aloud to Sarah. We must terminate our partnership due to recent publicity concerns. The rain pelted against the studio windows, matching my mood. 3 more advanced students had withdrawn that week, citing family decisions. My phone buzzed. Thea's message read, Big breakthrough in the case. Need to work late. Rain check on dinner? It wasn't the first canceled plan this week. The case was consuming her, leaving us both stretched thin. I typed back a brief okay and turned to face my remaining students. That evening, alone in the studio, I lost myself in dance. The empty space echoed with memories of fuller classes, simpler times. My reflection showed every worry line, every sleepless night. The studio door opened. Thea stood there, soaked from the rain, still in her court clothes. "I thought you were working late," I said, continuing my routine. I am. She dropped her briefcase. "But something Barrett said today." I stopped dancing. "What did he say?" "That I'm destroying your life's work for a case." Her voice cracked. "Rachel, am I?" The question hung between us like storm clouds. I thought about the lost sponsorship, the dwindling class sizes, the whispers behind my back at dance conferences. "My life's work isn't this studio," I snapped. "It's teaching dance, creating art, inspiring others. Something you've been too busy to notice lately." Her green eyes flashed. "Too busy fighting for people's rights." "And what about us? Where do we fit in your fight?" The argument escalated, words we'd both been holding back finally spilling out. About priorities, about balance, about fears neither of us had voiced. "I can't be your perfect ballet teacher trophy partner," I said bitterly. "And I can't abandon this case just because it's inconvenient for your business." She stormed out, leaving me alone with the rain and regret. I danced until exhaustion took over, trying to find answers in movement. Hours passed. The storm grew stronger. Then, near midnight, the studio door opened again. Thea stood there, changed into dance clothes, her hair still damp. Without a word, she took position beside me at the bar. We danced in silence, our movements gradually synchronizing. The tension melted with each shared breath, each mirrored gesture. Finally, she spoke. "I'm scared, Rachel, scared of losing this case, losing you, losing everything we could be." I turned to face her. "I'm scared too, but fear isn't a reason to stop dancing." She pulled me close, our foreheads touching. "Teach me again, like that first private lesson." We made love there in the studio, gentle and desperate, the storm providing our soundtrack. Later, wrapped in emergency blankets from my office, we talked until dawn. "We need to find balance," she whispered, tracing patterns on my skin. "We need to trust our choreography," I replied, "even when the steps get complicated." Morning light crept through the windows, painting new shadows on familiar walls. Sarah would arrive soon, bringing fresh challenges, more decisions to face. But something had shifted during the night. We'd found our rhythm again, remembered why we started this dance together. "Stay for morning class?" I asked, standing to dress. Thea smiled, reaching for her dance shoes. "Lead the way, Miss Martinez." The storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean. Ready for a new day, a new dance, a new understanding of what it means to be perfectly imperfect together. The press conference room buzzed with anticipation. I stood at the back, watching Thea adjust her microphone. She caught my eye and smiled, drawing strength from our shared glance. "As a dancer and educator," I began my prepared statement, "I've learned that true art knows no boundaries, neither does love." Camera flashes exploded. As I publicly declared my support for the adoption rights case, Thea's hand found mine at the podium, our fingers intertwining. Back at the studio, Sarah was orchestrating our biggest event yet, a fundraiser combining dance and legal advocacy. The space transformed with twinkling lights and elegant decorations. "The guest list keeps growing," she reported, showing me her tablet. "Seems your speech struck a chord." That evening, watching students rehearse for the fundraiser, I noticed new faces in my classes, parents who specifically chose our studio, drawn by its stance on inclusion. "Your advanced class has 3 new registrations," Thea mentioned, entering with takeout dinner. "All citing your press conference." We ate cross-legged on the studio floor, sharing spring rolls and plans. "Barrett's team is scrambling," she grinned. They didn't expect this level of community support. The fundraiser night arrived with electric energy. Dancers mingled with lawyers, artists with activists. My students performed with pride, their movements telling stories of acceptance and change. "Miss Martinez?" Emily, one of my youngest students, tugged at my sleeve. "Is it true you love Miss Murphy?" I knelt to her level. "Yes, sweetheart, very much." She beamed. "Like in fairy tales?" "Even better. Like in real life." The evening's highlight was a special performance, Thea and I dancing a duet we'd choreographed together. As the music began, the room fell silent. We moved as one, telling our story through dance. Every lift, every turn spoke of trust and transformation. When the piece ended, the applause was deafening. Later, we escaped to the rooftop. The Huntington Beach skyline sparkled below, music from the fundraiser floating up softly. "Dance with me again," Thea whispered, pulling me close. We swayed under the stars, no choreography needed. Her lips found mine in a gentle kiss that tasted of champagne and possibility. "The studio's different now," I murmured against her shoulder. "Better different? Braver different." A shooting star streaked across the sky. Below, the fundraiser continued, voices and music blending into a celebration of change. "Remember our first flight?" Thea asked, twirling me slowly. Window seats and turbulence. Best delayed flight of my life. The rooftop door opened. Sarah appeared with news about donation totals exceeding all expectations. "We're trending locally," she announced, showing us her phone. #DanceForChange. Thea laughed. "From ballet teacher to social media sensation. Don't forget lawyer's girlfriend," I teased. "Partner?" she corrected softly. "In dance and life." We rejoined the party, hands linked. The studio hummed with new energy, new purpose. Students practiced with renewed passion, inspired by our story. That night, after the last guest left, we danced again in the empty studio. Our shadows played across the walls, two women who found strength in each other. "Thank you," Thea whispered, "for dancing with me. Thank you for teaching me new steps." Outside, the city slept, but inside our studio we kept dancing, creating our own rhythm, our own rules, our own perfect moment under the moonlight streaming through the windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight belonged to us, to love, to the beautiful dance of two hearts beating in perfect time. The courthouse loomed before us, its marble steps already crowded with reporters. Thea gripped my hand tighter, her other arm clutching her briefcase. "Ready?" I asked, smoothing her jacket collar. "Born ready." But her voice trembled slightly. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Barrett's team sat ready, their expressions smug. I took my seat in the front row, watching Thea arrange her papers with practiced precision. "All rise," the bailiff called. The morning proceeded with opening statements. Thea stood, her posture perfect from months of dance training. Her voice carried the same grace she showed in the studio. "Your Honor, this case isn't about politics. It's about love's ability to create families." During the lunch recess, we huddled in a quiet corridor. "You're dancing in there," I whispered, straightening her hair. "Using your lessons about rhythm and timing," she smiled. "The judge is our audience." Back in session, Barrett's cross-examination turned aggressive. "Miss Murphy, isn't your personal relationship influencing your judgment?" "Objection, relevance," Thea's CO counsel called. "Sustained," the judge barked. I watched Thea maintain composure, remembering our late-night practice sessions. The same focus she brought to mastering difficult combinations now showed in her legal arguments. "Love isn't a legal liability," she stated firmly. "It's the foundation of family." The afternoon stretched into evening. When court finally adjourned, Thea's hands shook as she packed her files. "You were magnificent," I said, helping her gather papers. "It's not over yet." We drove to the studio, needing its familiar comfort. Thea changed into dance clothes, working through her nervous energy and movement. "Show me that combination again," she requested. "The one about rising above." I guided her through the steps, our bodies finding shared rhythm. The studio mirrors reflected our dance, two women supporting each other through life's complex choreography. "What if we lose?" she whispered during a pause. "Then we keep dancing, keep fighting, together." She pulled me closer, our foreheads touching. The kiss was gentle, grounding us both in the moment. Later, reviewing case notes spread across the studio floor, Thea suddenly sat up. "That's it." "What's it?" "The perfect closing argument. It's like that piece you choreographed about transformation." We worked through the night, blending legal precision with artistic passion. Dawn found us asleep among scattered papers and dance shoes. Sarah arrived early, carrying coffee and courthouse-appropriate clothes for both of us. "Your advanced class made this," she said, handing Thea a good luck card. The second day of testimony flew by. Barrett's witnesses faced Thea's skilled cross-examination, her questions as precisely placed as pirouettes. During the final recess, I found her in the courthouse bathroom, practicing her closing statement. "Remember," I said, massaging her shoulders. "Just like in dance, feel the moment." She nodded, took a deep breath, and returned to court. Standing before the judge, she began her closing argument. "Your Honor, this case, like life itself, is about the courage to move beyond traditional steps." Her words flowed like choreography, each point building to the next. The courtroom sat spellbound. When she finished, silence held for a moment before the judge called recess for deliberation. In the corridor, Thea collapsed into my arms. "Now we wait. Now we breathe," I corrected. Like before any performance. We spent that evening in the studio, dancing our anxiety away. Whatever tomorrow brought, we'd face it together, in perfect step. The email arrived during morning class. "Dear Miss Martinez, the National Dance Company invites you to join as principal instructor." My students continued their combinations as I stared at my phone, mind racing. New York, prestigious position. Everything I dreamed of before Thea. "You're distracted today," Sarah noted during lunch break. Before I could respond, Thea burst through the studio doors, waving a letter. "Thompson and Associates wants me as junior partner." Her excitement filled the room. The law firm was progressive, known for social justice cases. But it was in San Francisco. "That's wonderful," I managed, the National Dance Company email burning in my pocket. That evening, we celebrated at our favorite beachside restaurant. Thea bubbled with plans while I pushed food around my plate. "Rachel?" She reached across the table. "What's wrong?" I showed her the email. The silence that followed felt heavier than any music we'd danced to. "New York," she whispered. "San Francisco," I countered. The sunset painted the ocean in golds and pinks, but neither of us noticed. Our perfect choreography had hit an unexpected turn. "We could try long distance," Thea suggested, her voice uncertain. "Like we tried when you were in court for weeks?" More silence. A seagull landed nearby, searching for crumbs. Back at the studio, we danced. No words, just movement. Our bodies spoke what our voices couldn't. "Remember our first private lesson?" Thea asked during a water break. "You couldn't point your toes properly." "Still can't sometimes," she smiled. "But you never gave up on me." The next morning, I called the National Dance Company. The director was understanding but pressed for an answer within the week. Thea spent her lunch break watching my advanced class. "You're amazing with them," she observed. "The firm needs your expertise," I replied. We were at an impasse. Both opportunities seemed perfect on paper, but reality felt different. That evening, walking along Huntington Beach, Thea stopped suddenly. "What if?" "What if what?" "What if we created something new? Here?" She explained her vision, combining law practice with dance education, creating a space for arts advocacy and social justice. "Your choreography, my legal skills," she continued, "something uniquely ours." The idea took root as we walked, growing with each step. By midnight, sprawled across my living room floor, we had filled pages with plans. "It's crazy," I said, looking at our notes. "Crazy good," Thea corrected, pulling me close. The next day, I declined New York. Thea called San Francisco. Our phones buzzed with concerned messages from colleagues. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, watching us clear space for a small legal library in the studio office. I looked at Thea, already sketching plans for combined dance and advocacy workshops. Never been surer. That night, we walked the beach again. The same seagulls, same waves, but everything felt different. "Dance with me," Thea said, pulling me into the shallow water. We moved together, waves lapping at our feet, creating new steps for our shared future. No music but our laughter, no audience but the stars. "Think we're making the right choice?" I asked. She twirled me under the moonlight. "I think we're making our choice. That makes it right." The ocean breeze carried promises of challenges ahead, but as we danced on the beach, I knew we'd found our perfect balance. Sometimes the best choreography comes from breaking traditional steps and creating your own dance. The certified letter arrived without warning. Notice of intent to purchase Huntington Beach Arts District redevelopment project. They want to turn the studio into luxury condos. I told Thea, my voice hollow. They're offering triple market value. She read the letter, her lawyer instincts kicking in. There's always a way around these things. But the timing couldn't have been worse. We just started renovating the studio's second floor for her legal practice. Maybe it's a sign, Sarah suggested gently, to take the money and start fresh elsewhere. That evening, watching my students practice, every crack in the walls, every worn floorboard held memories. This space had shaped countless dancers, and now it was shaping something new. Thea found me after hours, still sitting in the empty studio. I've been thinking, she said, settling beside me. Dangerous habit for a lawyer. She smiled. What if we counter-offered? Not with money, but with purpose? Her idea was bold: transform the studio into a community arts and advocacy center. Dance classes, legal aid, youth programs, all under one roof. The developers want profit, I argued. They don't care about community impact. Then we make them care. Her eyes sparkled with determination. The next weeks became a blur of meetings. Thea worked her legal magic, building community support. I rallied dance families, local artists, anyone who believed in our vision. It's not just about saving a dance studio, Thea explained at the city council meeting. It's about preserving the heart of this community. Support grew unexpectedly. Former students shared stories of transformation. Parents spoke about inclusion and acceptance. Even Barrett, my old sponsor, showed up to voice support. The arts district needs this, he admitted. Maybe I was wrong before. One evening, reviewing renovation plans in the studio, Thea paused the music. Remember when we thought we had to choose between our dreams? I joined her at the bar. Seems like another lifetime. We just needed to dream bigger. The developers called a meeting. Their sleek presentation about property values met our passionate defense of community needs. Miss Martinez, their spokesman began. Your dedication is admirable, but nothing. Thea interrupted. We have alternate funding sources, community backing, and a solid plan for sustainable operation. I watched her work, remembering the lawyer from that first flight. She'd grown stronger, just like her dance technique. The negotiations stretched into night. Finally, a compromise emerged. We'd keep the building, with developers investing in renovations instead of demolition. You're sure about this? I asked Thea later, dancing our victory dance in the empty studio. About combining our passions? Always. The renovation plans expanded. The main studio would remain sacred, but other spaces would transform. Legal offices upstairs, community rooms, even a small performance space. It's not the same studio anymore, Sarah observed, watching workers install new windows. It's better, I replied. It's evolving. That night, Thea and I sat on the roof, watching the sunset over Huntington Beach. Construction dust covered our clothes, but we didn't care. Dance with me? She asked, standing. We moved together, creating new choreography for our expanding dreams. The studio below held our past, but up here, we planned our future. Think we can really do this? I whispered. She dipped me low, confident and strong. We already are. The stars appeared one by one, witnesses to our rooftop dance. Sometimes the best performances happen when life forces you to improvise. The grand reopening drew crowds beyond our expectations. Dancers, lawyers, community members, all gathered to celebrate our reimagined space. Martinez Dance and Legal Advocacy Center, Sarah read from the new sign. Has a nice ring to it. Inside, the transformation was stunning. Original hardwood floors gleamed beneath updated lighting. The mirrors remained, but now they reflected more than just dance. Our first case arrived that morning, a talented teenage dancer needing scholarship assistance. Thea handled the paperwork while I assessed her technique. This is exactly what we dreamed of, I whispered to Thea between meetings. She squeezed my hand. Just the beginning. The community embraced our vision faster than we'd hoped. Morning dance classes flowed seamlessly into afternoon legal clinics. The space hummed with purpose. You've created something special here, Barrett admitted, watching a combined dance therapy and legal counseling session. I corrected, seeing Thea guide a client through both legal forms and basic dance steps. Our unique approach gained attention. Local news featured our program, highlighting how movement and advocacy could intertwine. Dance teaches confidence, I explained to reporters. Law provides voice. Thea added, together, they create change. One evening, a former student returned with her partner. They needed adoption guidance and dance lessons for their wedding. You inspired us, they said. Showed us love knows no boundaries. Watching Thea work with them, I remembered our own journey, how far we'd come from that turbulent flight. The success of our first cases brought more. Artists seeking legal protection, dancers needing advocacy, families looking for support. We need more staff, Sarah announced, juggling phone calls and dance registrations. And more space, Thea added, reviewing applications. But it was a good kind of growing pain. Each new challenge proved our concept worked. Late one night, after a particularly successful day, we danced in the main studio. Our shadows played across walls that had witnessed so much change. Remember when you couldn't trust your partner work? I teased. Thea executed a perfect lift. Had a good teacher. The next morning brought our biggest achievement yet. A national foundation wanted to replicate our model in other cities. They're calling it revolutionary, Sarah reported. It's just love in action, Thea replied. We celebrated that evening with our entire team. Lawyers danced with dancers, clients became friends, boundaries blurred in the best ways. To perfect form, Thea toasted. To imperfect journeys, I added. Later, alone in our studio, we swayed to invisible music. The space felt different now, fuller, richer with purpose. Think we changed the world? Thea asked. We changed our world, I answered. Sometimes that's enough. Outside, Huntington Beach continued its eternal dance with the ocean. Inside, we'd created our own rhythm, our own way of moving through life. Dance with me? I asked, though we were already moving. Always, she answered, leading me into a turn. Our shadows merged on the studio floor, lawyer and dancer, advocate and artist, partners in every sense. Sometimes the most beautiful performances aren't on stage. They're in the quiet moments, when two hearts beat in perfect time, creating something larger than themselves. The studio lights dimmed automatically, but we kept dancing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to help others find their own perfect form. But tonight was ours, a celebration of how love can transform not just two lives, but an entire community. 1 year after opening the Martinez Dance and Legal Advocacy Center, our model had been adopted in 5 cities. The morning sun streamed through our expanded studios as I watched Thea prepare for another landmark case. National spotlight this time, she said, adjusting her suit. Ready to make history again? Our foundation had grown beyond dreams. What started as a desperate attempt to save a dance studio had evolved into a movement. The anniversary performance is tonight, I reminded her, helping with her collar. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The evening program celebrated our journey. Students performed pieces about transformation, while successful clients shared their stories. Remember our first dance? Thea whispered, as we watched from backstage. In this very studio, when you couldn't point your toes. She laughed. Now look at us. The final piece was special, Our Story, performed by advanced students. The turbulent flight meeting, the challenges, the triumph of love over convention. During intermission, we sneaked away to the rooftop. The Huntington Beach sunset painted the sky in familiar golds and pinks. I have something to show you, Thea said, pulling me toward the edge. Below, a moving truck was parked. What's this? She handed me a key. Our new beachfront home. Just 3 blocks away. You didn't. I did. Time to start our next chapter. The second act began with a surprise. Our students had choreographed a piece about future dreams, ending with a marriage proposal. Young love, I sighed, watching them celebrate. Speaking of which, Thea reached into her pocket. My heart stopped. There, under stage lights, she held out a simple gold ring. Dance with me forever? She asked. The audience erupted as I said yes, our students cheering from the wings. Later that night, we walked the beach near our new home. The ocean waves provided perfect background music. Think we'll ever stop dancing? I asked. Not a chance. She twirled me under the moonlight. We're just getting started. The next morning, watching sunrise from our beachfront balcony, everything felt right. The studio was visible in the distance, its windows catching early light. "Ready for another day of changing lives?" Thea asked, bringing coffee. "Always ready to dance with you." We walked to work together, hand in hand. Students arrived for morning class, lawyers prepared for cases, and our unique symphony continued. "Miss Martinez," called a young dancer, "will you show us that love story combination again?" Thea winked. "Show them how it's done, partner." I took position in front of the mirrors. The same mirrors that had witnessed our first private lesson, our struggles, our triumphs. As I began to move, Thea joined me. Without music, without planning, we danced our story again. Every step spoke of growth, every turn reflected change. The students watched, understanding that dance was more than movement. It was life itself, performed with grace and courage. "Perfect form," Thea whispered as we finished. "Perfect love," I corrected. Outside our windows, Huntington Beach continued its eternal dance. Inside, we'd created our own paradise, a place where art and advocacy, love and law, moved in perfect harmony. Our story wasn't ending. It was evolving, like a dance that keeps finding new rhythms, new steps, new ways to move through life together. "Ready for our next performance?" Thea asked. I took her hand, ready to begin another day of our beautiful dance. "With you?" "Always." The morning sun filled our studio with promise, as it had that first day we met. But now we moved together, two hearts beating in perfect time, creating magic with every step. Some dances never end. They just keep getting better.